Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss how the next by-election, expected to be in February, will be much higher stakes than the previous ones, now that Peter Bone has been officially recalled from Parliament. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So the latest Tory sleaze monster, Peter Bone, has been thrown out of Parliament now. His suspension for the awful abuse of his staff meant a recall petition, and enough constituents signed it to remove him from the House of Commons. There will now be a by-election. Rishi Sunak, just as in the past, I think will want to hold it as soon as possible in order to restrict the time Labour have to campaign. He can't move the writ until Parliament's sitting again, so we're probably talking about the by-election being sometime in February. Bone did not take the news well, it's fair to say. He attacked the fact that a minority of his constituents effectively sacked him. It was 13%. You need 10% of constituents to sign the recall petition or registered voters, and it was about 13%. He said the fact that about 86% didn't sign it shows that they didn't want him removed, which is nonsense, of course. It means 86% either didn't want him removed or didn't care, or didn't know about the recall petition, because recall petitions are not exactly widely publicised. You would think there would be a letter going out to all registered voters telling them about this and telling them where they can sign the recall petition. This does not occur as far as I can tell. And if he thinks constituents still want him, well, there's nothing to stop him standing in the by-election and taking his seat back. Whether or not the Tories want him to stand as the Conservative candidate, that is up to them, but he can stand if he wants to. It's also been pointed out that a Brexiteer doesn't really get to complain about minorities deciding things. Minorities always decide things, and it's them that wants that system in place. A minority of voters voted for Brexit. A minority of voters voted for parties wanting to take us out of the EU without a confirmatory referendum in 2019. Finally, on Peter Bone himself, before we get to the good stuff, I'll just say this. When the Recall of MPs Act 2015, which is the law that's kicked him out now, when it was being originally debated and voted on in the House of Commons in 2014, there's no record of Peter Bone making any speech during the crucial third reading debate, and it would appear that no MP voted against the bill. Thanks for those who helped me sort of track that down, including Bone. He did vote against it earlier in the passage, so he was definitely against it, but not at the final vote. In fact, there were several Labour amendments on the final vote passed on that day, which the government objected to. So the bill had enough support within the House of Commons to not only invite no votes against, but to get opposition amendments approved by the House against the advice of the government. And being clear, that will only ever happen if it's something that's clearly got a lot of public support. You know, like, for example, if there's people who actually object to the bill and they don't want this bill passing into law, why wouldn't they vote against it? Or why wouldn't they say they want to vote against it? Because they know it'll look bad in public. So they knew that the public supported this new law. Interestingly, one of the Labour amendments that was passed, had it not been passed, Bone would not have been recalled. It would have saved his bacon. Also, it looks like Bone did support an amendment calling for the threshold to be 50%. You should have 50% of voters needed to trigger the recall, which would have been ludicrous because you don't even get 50% voting for anyone in a by-election or local election. You only ever get 50% voting in a general election. And even then, it's very rarely 50% for a single candidate. Needless to say, the amendment failed, which is why he's now been booted out. And because he didn't object to the final bill, officially, he supported it. So he doesn't really get to complain now. Quite funny because, you can imagine thinking back in 2014, if you were watching the passage of this bill, I don't think I particularly was, why would any MP object to their constituents being allowed to recall them if they commit a series of, serious offences? Well, now we know. But anyway, the by-election itself, and there's going to be a lot of uniquely interesting features to this one, because you may be imagining, we've had by-elections this year, Phil. They've all gone largely the same way. There was Uxbridge, bit of an outlier, but basically The Tories have a by-election and then either the Lib Dems or Labour nick the seat. That's how it's going. That's how it's going to go with this one. And it's like, okay, I expect the result to definitely go in Labour's favour. But there are differences with this by-election. This is going to be new. First of all, Isaac Levido, who's the Tories' professional election strategist, he's been installed at Conservative campaign headquarters in the new year. Right now, it's basically amateurs in charge. Amateurs have been running the Conservatives campaigning, really. We've had the people like Greg Hans, various people who are not like professional campaign strategists. But with Isaac Levido running CCHQ from January, that'll presumably mean he will be coordinating the Tories campaign for the Wellingborough by-election. Previous by-elections have been run by those without any professional background in running campaigns. So this will be the first by-election run by a professional for the Tories. And the one who's also going to run their general election campaign. So it'll give us a chance to see whether, for a start, whether he's able to train Tory MPs to put some effort in. But also, depending on how Sunak manages to negotiate the third reading of his Rwanda bill, which will happen before this by-election, it may be that he's under immense pressure to show progress. No matter what happens, the general election will be taken within 12 months of this by-election, no matter how late they leave it. And it's a bit of a bellweather seat, which makes it quite spicy. So it's generally Conservative, but it does flip when Labour are in the ascendancy. For example, Labour won the seat in 1997 and 2001. But they didn't in 2005. The Tories won it in 2005, even though Labour won the general election that year. Basically, unless the nature of the constituencies changed a lot, it's a seat which tries to vote Conservative. Its default is to vote Conservative. It only votes Labour when it looks at the Tory clown car show and says, look, we cannot vote for that. And also, it has to be that Labour look like the only sensible choice of government. Only when those things happen does Wellingborough vote Labour. So if Sunak is to have any hope of even restricting Labour to a small majority, much less a hung parliament, he needs to be able to win this seat. If he can't win this seat, then all the indications would be Labour are going to be on for a hefty majority. It also lets us have another snapshot of Reform UK. This is what I'm going to find very interesting. I keep saying that I think the online pollsters, which is almost all of them, seem to be inflating Reform's share of the vote. If Reform UK really are on for the sort of vote share that they claim, and the Tories fear, then Wellingborough will be a very good test. It's a Tory by-election, so it attracts the anti-Tory protest vote, which is effectively what Reform UK are. Wellingborough itself is the sort of seat where Reform UK would expect to do well, strong Leave voting area. Everything is set up for them. Whatever Reform get, it is likely to be a higher share of the vote than they would in the general election. There's a combination of two factors, really. First, those who tend not to bother with by-elections are those who vote for the government. The reason they don't turn up for a by-election is because you cannot change the government with a by-election, or be very weird circumstances that allow you to do that. They're certainly not going to change it with this by-election. So they're not going to bother. If the only reason, and there's lots of voters who just want to use their vote to change the government or to keep the government, there's no point in voting this by-election for those people. Come the general election, those voters will be out and voting either Conservative or Labour. They're not going to vote in Reform in significant numbers. So basically, all those who are prepared to vote for an unrealistic candidate like Reform UK are as likely to vote in the by-election as the general election. Second, by-elections are an opportunity for supporters of the party of government to vote for a protest candidate as a way of sending a message to Downing Street. It can be a desperate appeal to persuade them to change course on something. It's quite common for a significant number of voters who will vote Tory in the general election. They will absolutely vote Tory when it comes to the general election. But for a by-election where they feel they've got more of a free hand, they may vote Reform UK as a warning to Sunak to change tack. So if Reform's share of the vote at this by-election does not come close to matching their polling results, the polling results are inflated, as I suspect. Finally, this by-election will perhaps give us a taste of the nastiness, I think, to come in the election itself. Not only will Sunak be desperate to retain the seat, But the Tories will want to test run some of their attack lines ahead of the general election. So will Labour as well, I imagine. Could get very heated, and the results will presumably be keenly observed by voters around the country, because next year, I mean, there's lots of voters who tend to shy away from politics, not that interested. They don't like it when people talk about politics, but they'll be aware that the general election is coming at any time. And these we're talking about people who do go out and vote in the general election, and they know that the next one's a big one. So the spotlight is going to be on Wellingborough. It's going to be quite intense. And afterwards, we will have the local and mayoral elections. If Sunak doesn't hold the general election on the same day, those are likely to put further pressure on him. There's also likely to be another by-election in Blackpool South, but Scott Benton is appealing his suspension, so that could take a while. And in any case, that will be an easy Labour win. And finally, another, I should just add on right at the end, another bit of information we'll see is we've seen evidence of tactical voting, clear evidence of tactical voting in the by-election so far. It'll be another opportunity to see how well that's working as well. But there we are. Sunak will not have wanted the Wellingborough recall petition to succeed. That it has done so gives him an enormous headache, and everyone else, including within his own party, the chance to learn a great deal from the campaign. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.